son of late martial arts star Bruce Lee has died. 27-year-old Brandon Lee was killed during a movie set accident today. He was filming a scene for the movie The Crow.
Brandon Lee was young, immensely talented, and finally stepping out from under the shadow of his legendary father, Bruce Lee. His breakout role in The Crow was almost complete, just days away from wrapping, when tragedy struck. He was fatally shot during filming, in what should have been a routine scene. What followed was a storm of confusion, cover-ups, and conspiracy theories that still haven't been put to rest. How did a real bullet end up in a prop gun? Who failed to follow safety protocols? Why were warning signs ignored? In this deep dive, we unravel the chilling parallels to Bruce Lee's death, explore the rumored curse that haunted the Crow, and uncover the twist that left even investigators shaken. It was a basic action sequence. Brandon Lee, playing Eric Draven, enters carrying groceries, only to be ambushed. One of the assailants, played by Michael Massey, raises a revolver and fires. Brandon collapses dramatically on cue. It had been rehearsed, choreographed, and was not considered high risk. The camera rolled, Massey aimed and pulled the trigger. Brandon collapsed. The director called cut. The crew applauded. And then silence. Brandon wasn't moving. At first, people assumed he was still in character. Then panic set in. Real blood pooled beneath him, not a special effect, but a devastating reality. He was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Doctors fought to save him, but it was too late. At 1:03 p.m. on March 31, 1993, Brandon Lee was pronounced dead. He was just 28 years old. The weapon was supposed to be loaded with blanks, harmless cartridges that simulate gunfire without firing a projectile. But something lethal pierced Brandon's abdomen, a real .44 caliber slug. The investigation revealed a horrifying error. Earlier in production, a dummy round, meant to be inert, was improperly prepared with its primer left intact. During a dry fire, the primer ignited just enough to drive the bullet into the barrel. A squib load. No one noticed. Days later, a blank was fired in that same revolver. The blank's explosive charge propelled the lodged bullet like a live round. At close range, Brandon was fatally struck. To make matters worse, there was no licensed weapons master on set that night. The Crow was under immense pressure. A tight schedule, a limited budget. Crews worked up to 100-hour weeks. Safety protocols were ignored. A prop assistant handled the weapon without training or clearance. Real bullets and dummy rounds were stashed together. The armorer wasn't present. No inspections, no clearance, no triple checks. Just a working firearm handed to an actor. And tragedy followed. Even before Brandon's death, the shoot had been plagued with accidents. A crew member was electrocuted, others injured. Equipment failed. Storms destroyed parts of the set. Behind the usual production woes, rumors began to swirl. The Crow was cursed. The jammed hours, the mounting fatigue, and the mysterious breakdowns contributed to an atmosphere of dread that foreshadowed the tragedy to come. And when Brandon's life was taken so eerily in a scene of death and resurrection, the line between fiction and reality blurred in the most chilling way. But the parallels went deeper, down to a legacy lost and undone. Bruce Lee, a legend whose death in 1973 was ruled to be cerebral edema, had died under equally mysterious circumstances. Theories ranged from allergic reactions to criminal conspiracy, with no shortage of speculation. What made Brandon's death all the more unnerving was the storyline in Game of Death, a film where Bruce's character is shot on a film set by a real bullet placed in a prop gun. 20 years later, Brandon was killed under nearly identical conditions. Art and life converged in the cruelest way imaginable. The gun was a Smith & Wesson Model 629-44 Magnum. The dummy rounds used earlier were made in-house, without ballistic supervision. A defective primer-laden dummy bullet lodged itself in the barrel. When a blank was fired, it had lethal force, and no one had checked. No licensed professional was on set. Responsibility was fragmented. Protocol was ignored. The result was unspeakable. Officially, it was ruled a tragic accident. But many, including those closest to the production and the Lee family, viewed it as negligence on a criminal level. Forensic experts even questioned whether the slug was a properly modified dummy at all or a live round, immaculate and factory-made. If true, that meant live ammunition had been on set in violation of safety standards. Who brought it? Who loaded it? Why were there no records? And what of the autopsy findings? Anonymous crew members later confirmed the danger in-house rounds, lax supervision, and no clear chain of custody. Detective J.J. Leitner, who led the investigation, said simply, "Nothing's been ruled out." The eeriest whispers pointed toward sabotage, whether in revenge for Bruce, industry jealousy, or just the randomness of tragedy. Filming halted after Brandon's death. His fiancée, Eliza Hutton, just weeks from marrying him, found herself at the center of a tragedy she never publicly addressed. The actor who triggered the shot, Michael Massey, was shattered. Traumatized, he stepped away from acting and avoided ever watching The Crow. "You don't ever get over something like that?" he later said. Despite the grief, the film was completed as a tribute. Using body doubles, early footage, and emerging digital effects, The Crow was released in 1994. It became a cult classic, hailed for Brandon's haunting performance and the tragic beauty of his final role. Audiences were moved by the layered symbolism, an actor who plays a revenant and becomes one in reality. No criminal charges were ever filed. The DA ruled it an accident. But many felt the truth was far more complex. Records of who handled the gun, who created the dummy rounds, and who was supposed to oversee weapon safety were incomplete, if they existed at all. Brandon Lee's death remains one of Hollywood's darkest chapters, a tragedy born from fatigue, incompetence, and possibly something more sinister. Who loaded that gun? Who overlooked the safety checks? And was his death truly an accident or a deliberate crime? To this day, no one can answer with certainty. Official reports closed the book quickly, pointing to a series of mistakes, rather than criminal intent. But behind the scenes, whispers painted a more chilling picture. The production was operating in chaos. Corners were being cut at every level. Crew members later admitted they were working in shifts so long that hallucinations weren't uncommon. Budgets were slashed, and with it, essential roles were filled by untrained personnel or left vacant entirely. And in the middle of this crumbling infrastructure was a loaded gun that no one took responsibility for. Why was a real firearm used at all? Hollywood has long relied on modified guns, prop weapons incapable of firing live rounds. But on the set of The Crow, they opted for functionality. The .44 Magnum wasn't just real. It was capable of killing. In the hands of a professional armorer, even real weapons can be managed safely. But on that fateful night, the weapons expert had left the set hours earlier. No official replacement was designated. Instead, a prop assistant, reportedly underqualified, was tasked with managing the gun. They retrieved it from an unsecured area where it had sat loaded, unsupervised, and unchecked. In the chaos of the night shoot, no one thought to verify the chamber. No one performed a safety inspection. No one asked the critical question, what's actually inside this gun? Some insiders later alleged that real bullets had been used earlier in the shoot to capture close-ups of ammunition. These rounds were supposed to be removed and dismantled, but somehow one made its way back into the gun. Others claimed that the dummy rounds were assembled by a low-level crew member who had no experience in ballistics, using makeshift parts and incomplete components. One had a primer still intact. When the hammer struck it during an earlier scene, the bullet dislodged slightly into the barrel. Squib load. A deadly malfunction, sitting dormant, waiting. When the blank was fired later that night, it didn't matter that there was no actual bullet in the cartridge. The force of the blank explosion was enough to propel the lodged round out of the barrel, with lethal velocity. At point-blank range, Brandon had no chance. And yet, even with this explanation, the doubts linger. How could so many mistakes happen in such a short window? Why weren't safety protocols enforced, especially with live firearms involved? The standard Hollywood chain of custody. Weapon is checked by armorer, verified by assistant director, then handed to actor, was completely broken. In this case, the chain was more like a fog, no signatures, no logs, no accountability. The studio quickly moved to settle. Brandon's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit naming multiple production companies, executives, and crew members. Eventually, an undisclosed financial settlement was reached. But no admissions of guilt, no formal consequences, and no public answers. That vacuum of truth invited theories. One of the most persistent was sabotage. Some believed that someone on set deliberately tampered with the weapon, either to send a message or to create chaos. Perhaps a disgruntled crew member. Perhaps someone with a vendetta. Perhaps someone who simply didn't think the bullet would kill. No evidence was ever produced, but the theory never died. Others saw a more mystical explanation, the so-called Lee family curse. Bruce Lee had died young, mysteriously, on the brink of superstardom. Brandon, too, died young, mysteriously, on the brink of superstardom. Both deaths were marked by odd coincidences. Bruce died while working on Game of Death, a film in which his character is shot by a real bullet on a movie set. 20 years later, Brandon dies in exactly that way. Was it a grim coincidence? A self-fulfilling prophecy? Or something darker? A fate inherited? The legend grew. Fans and conspiracy theorists pored over autopsy reports, set photos, production schedules, even call sheets. They pointed to inconsistencies. Brandon's entrance in the scene wasn't rehearsed that day. Why? The camera angle was changed at the last minute. Why? The original actor who was supposed to fire the gun had been replaced. Why? Some of these details had mundane explanations. Others, no explanation at all. The actor who pulled the trigger, Michael Massey, was never the same. He spiraled into depression, took years off from acting, and avoided interviews. He would later say, "I don't think you ever get over something like that." He passed away in 2016, reportedly still haunted by what happened. Director Alex Proyas rarely speaks about the incident. When he does, it's with reverence and sorrow. "Brandon was more than an actor," he said once. "He was the spirit of that film. When we lost him, we lost our compass. And yet The Crow was finished, against all odds, using early CGI body doubles, and the footage Brandon had already shot. The filmmakers completed the movie. It was released in May 1994. Critics praised Brandon's performance, raw, emotional, almost prophetic. The film became a cult classic. But beneath its gothic beauty, every frame is haunted. Years later, the industry would revisit similar tragedies. In 2021, cinematographer Helena Hutchins was accidentally shot and killed on the set of Rust. Under eerily similar circumstances, live ammunition on set, mismanaged weapons, and a failure of protocol. The parallels were undeniable. And so, the conversation began again. Have we learned anything? Or is this just how the system works? Rushing toward the next release, cutting corners, and hoping tragedy doesn't catch up. In Brandon's case it did, and justice, many argue, never did. The final reports labeled it a freak accident, a 1 in a million tragedy. But the math doesn't feel right. When the safety systems are ignored, when untrained